Of all the days for the gate to have an existential crisis, it had to be this one. I sat in my slightly dented but mechanically sound Honda, the air conditioning fighting a losing battle against the oppressive June sun. In the back seat, secured with the kind of meticulous care usually reserved for transporting unstable isotopes, was my masterpiece. It was a custom cornhole set, crafted from hand-sanded birchwood. On its surface, rendered in glorious, high-gloss acrylic, was a painting of two majestic golden retrievers, clad in silver armor, jousting on the backs of unicorns against a backdrop of a swirling cosmos. It was, without a doubt, the pinnacle of my artistic career. It was also 40% of this month's income, and the client who had commissioned it, a woman named Tiffany, who communicated exclusively in capital letters and threatening emojis, was expecting it for her husband's surprise 40th birthday party. An event that started in exactly 45 minutes, a 25-minute drive away. I pulled up to the gate of Haute on Tranquil Meadows, a name that was, at best, aspirational. Usually I'd wave my little gray fob, and the wrought iron gates would swing open with a welcoming groan. Today, they remained resolutely, stubbornly closed. My fob did nothing. My car's built-in remote did nothing. I was being stonewalled by my own home. My eyes scanned the bars, searching for a clue, and landed on it. An offensively laminated sign affixed to the gate with a truly gratuitous number of zip ties. The font was Comic Sans, a typeface that has been scientifically proven to increase blood pressure. Attention residents. It screamed in bold black letters, "For your enhanced safety and security, the gate system has been upgraded. All previous fobs and codes are now deactivated. Please submit Form 8C, available at the clubhouse MF9, 11 a.m., to apply for a new secure access fob. Processing time is 4-6 weeks. Thank you for your cooperation." I read it once, then twice. The words swam before my eyes. 4 to 6 weeks? I had milk in my fridge with a shorter lifespan. This had to be a prank. A very, very bad laminated prank. I laid on my horn, a long, mournful blast that echoed through the eerily quiet streets, a mating call for the terminally frustrated. As if summoned by the sound, a figure emerged from the corner house, the one with the prize-winning azaleas and the tiny, judgmental gargoyles flanking the porch. It was Brenda. Of course it was Brenda, the self-crowned queen of the HOA Security Committee, a woman who moved with the unshakable certainty of someone who knows they are on the right side of every conceivable argument. She was wearing a powder blue tracksuit that perfectly matched her watering can, and she approached my car with a slow, deliberate gait that was far more menacing than a full sprint. "Having some trouble, Alex?" Her voice was like honey mixed with finely ground glass. I rolled down my window, the humid air instantly fogging my glasses. "Brenda, tell me this is a bad dream. Tell me I've fallen into a coma and this is all an elaborate bureaucratic nightmare my brain has cooked up." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "It's the new SecureGate protocol. It was in the newsletter last week. We're taking a proactive stance against crime." I blinked at her. "Crime?" "Brenda, the most scandalous thing to happen in this neighborhood in the last 5 years was when Mr. Henderson's poodle got loose and dug up your petunias. And let's be honest, the poodle had a point. Those petunias were ostentatious." Brenda's smile tightened. "There was a drone," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "It flew over my backyard, and last Tuesday a raccoon, a very large one, knocked over the Gables recycling bin. We can't be too careful." "A drone and a raccoon," I repeated slowly. "So the logical response was to turn our community into a low-budget Alcatraz?" "I have to deliver this," I said, gesturing wildly to the back seat. "This is a time-sensitive delivery of artisanal lawn game equipment. The fate of a man's 40th birthday party hangs in the balance. Brenda was unmoved. She was a wall of HOA bylaws, a fortress of arbitrary rules. The rules are in place for the good of the community, Alex. You should have read the newsletter. I used the newsletter to line my hamster's cage, I muttered under my breath. He finds the prose style both absorbent and uninspiring. What was that? I said, what am I supposed to do? I pleaded, my voice cracking with desperation. Brenda looked at me, then at my car, then at the impassable gate. A flicker of pure, unadulterated triumph lit up her eyes. This was her checkmate. You are more than welcome to park in the visitor lot, she said, gesturing vaguely towards a distant patch of asphalt that was, for all practical purposes, in another zip code. And walk to your destination. She delivered the line with the finality of a judge passing sentence. Then, with a tight, victorious smile, she turned and walked back to her azaleas, leaving me alone with my rage, my unicorns, and the soul-crushing reality of the secure gate protocol. I slammed the car into reverse, tires screeching in protest as I peeled back into my own driveway. My hands were shaking. My internal monologue was a torrent of creative and anatomically improbable insults aimed at Brenda, the HOA, and the inventor of lamination. The cornhole set in the back seat seemed to mock me with its whimsical, carefree depiction of mythical creatures at play. I stormed out of the car and into my garage, my sanctuary, my bat cave. It was a chaotic but organized space, filled with the comforting smells of sawdust and paint thinner. It was a place of creation, of projects both finished and forgotten. I paced back and forth on the cool concrete, a caged animal in my own suburban zoo. I kicked a stack of old tires, which did nothing but stub my toe and send a jolt of pain up my leg. Stupid gate, stupid Brenda, stupid proactive security! I yelled at a rack of wrenches. My foot lashed out again, this time connecting with a large, dusty shape covered by a faded canvas tarp. It was a satisfyingly solid thud. I had forgotten what was under there. Curiosity momentarily eclipsing my fury, I grabbed a corner of the tarp and yanked it away. And there it was. Leaning against the wall like a slumbering giant was a 6-foot-long, solid oak battering ram. Its body was thick as a telephone pole, and its business end was capped with a heavy, riveted, brutally functional iron head. A memory, sharp and clear, surfaced from the depths of my mind. A 2 a.m., whiskey-fueled online auction for movie props. The item description had read, authentic feel, minor scorch marks from dragonfire scene. Perfect for man cave or home defense against mythical beasts. It had seemed like a hilarious, brilliant idea at the time. My best friend Leo had not agreed. He had screenshotted my emailed receipt and sent it to me accompanied by a string of 100 laughing emojis. What are you ever going to do with that? His text had read. Lay siege to the post office when they lose a package? You, my friend, are an idiot. I had to admit, my justification at the time, it just looks cool, was a little thin. I'd dragged it into the garage, covered it with a tarp, and promptly forgotten about it. Until now. A slow, dangerous smile spread across my face. It felt alien on my rage-contorted features. I looked at the ram, a beautiful instrument of pure, focused kinetic energy. I thought of the gate, its industrial lock blinking with smug indifference. I thought of Brenda's face, alight with the petty joy of a bureaucratic victory. Leo, my friend, I whispered to the empty garage. You magnificent, short-sighted fool. It's time to make a withdrawal from the bank of bad ideas. The prophecy was about to be fulfilled. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of adrenaline and pure, unadulterated glee. The decision had been made. The Rubicon was about to be crossed, and I was going to do it with a medieval siege weapon. My first move, as any good general knows, was to call my war council. I pulled out my phone, my thumb hovering over Leo's name. I put him on speakerphone, the tinny ring echoing in the cavernous space of the garage as I began to assess the logistics of my new, insane plan. The ram was heavy, seriously heavy. You've reached the office of Leo Martinez, where your problems are probably more interesting than my spreadsheets. How can I help you? Leo's voice was a welcome intrusion of cynical humor. Cancel your 11 o'clock, I said, grunting as I tried to get some leverage on the base of the ram. The prophecy is being fulfilled. There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. Wait, what prophecy? The one where you finally alphabetize your spice rack? No, I said, wedging my foot under the ram and heaving. It didn't budge. A much older, much dumber prophecy. The battering ram prophecy. The silence that followed was profound. It was the kind of silence that contains multitudes. Disbelief, confusion, and then dawning comprehension. It was followed by a sound that started as a choked gasp and quickly escalated into a full-blown wheezing laugh. No, no way, are you serious? He howled. You're actually going to use it? Dude, I'm canceling my whole day. This is better than the World Series. I'm a little busy at the moment, Leo, I grunted, trying a different angle. I'm trying to figure out the physics of a one-man suburban siege. Any advice from the armchair? Okay, serious face, he said, though I could still hear the laughter bubbling under his words. First, you have to document this. This isn't just property damage, this is performance art. This is your magnum opus, your Sistine Chapel of suburban spite. Focus, Leo. Tactical advice. Right, you gotta get a running start. Momentum is your friend, and bend your knees. For the love of God, Alex, don't throw your back out before the first charge. This is for all of us, man. Every single person who's ever gotten a passive-aggressive note about the precise shade of their mailbox. You are our champion, our gate-slaying, HOA-defying hero. His ridiculous encouragement was exactly what I needed. It transformed my act of petty vandalism into a noble crusade. I finally managed to roll the ram onto its side. Now, how to get it to the front lines? It was then that the adrenaline-fueled joy gave way to a brief, chilling moment of clarity. This was going to cause a problem. A big, expensive, gate-shaped problem. Destroying community property, however cathartically justified, would have consequences beyond Brenda's apoplectic fit. I needed an exit strategy. I needed a cleanup crew. My phone still in hand, I switched from my contacts to my web browser and typed, "Emergency welding plus gate repair plus no questions asked." The top result was a simple, no-frills listing. Gus's Grinding and Welding. No job too weird. It had a 5-star rating based on 3 reviews, one of which simply said, "Gus fixed it." That was promising. I dialed the number. The voice that answered sounded like it was filtered through gravel and cigar smoke. Gus. Hi, Gus, I began, trying to sound as normal as possible. I have a hypothetical question for you. If a person, hypothetically, needed a metal gate repaired, rather urgently. Did you back into it with your truck? Gus's tone was flat, bored. He'd clearly heard this story before. Not exactly, I said carefully. Let's just say the damage will be more manual and highly intentional, and probably concentrated in the area of the lock mechanism. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the high-pitched whine of an angle grinder in the background, which abruptly stopped. Gus was giving me his full, undivided attention. "Send me a picture of the gate," he said, his voice betraying no hint of judgment. "I'll give you a quote. Is it steel or aluminum? Hollow or solid core?" I looked out my garage door towards the front of the neighborhood. I think it's jerk-proof grade? Another pause. Right, Gus said. I've got a surcharge for that. Tell you what, you text me the picture, and then you text me again when your manual event is complete. My guys can be on standby. Just so you know, the emergency call-out fee is steep. I'll pay it, I said without hesitation. Good man, Gus grunted and hung up. I was both terrified and deeply impressed. The man was a professional. He understood that sometimes things just needed to be broken, and other things needed to be fixed as a result. He was the yin to my destructive yang. My plan now had two phases: destruction and reconstruction. Feeling emboldened, I located an old furniture dolly I'd used for moving my couch, and, after a solid 10 minutes of grunting, sweating, and swearing under my breath, I managed to wrestle the battering ram onto it. It was an awkward, top-heavy load, but it was mobile. I was wheeling it out of my garage, the dolly's small wheels protesting under the immense weight, when a shadow fell over the driveway. I looked up. A police cruiser was gliding down the street, slowing to a crawl as it approached my house. My blood ran cold. My mind went completely blank. Every rational thought evaporated, replaced by a single, flashing neon sign in my brain that read, "Busted." I froze, one hand on the ram, trying to look as casual as a man can look while standing next to a 6-foot medieval siege weapon in the middle of a pristine suburban driveway. Play it cool, Alex, I told myself. You're just a normal guy, moving his perfectly normal, historical door opener for a walk. Nothing to see here. A young officer, who looked like he was maybe 12 years old and had just started shaving last week, leaned out his window. It was Officer Miller. "Morning," he said, his eyes flicking from my face to the ram and back again. "Everything all right here?" I forced a breezy, nonchalant smile that felt like it was about to crack my face in half. "Never better, officer. Just doing a little landscaping." I patted the smooth, worn oak of the ram. Officer Miller squinted, his brow furrowed in confusion. "With that?" My brain, which had previously been a useless puddle of panic, suddenly kicked into overdrive, fueled by pure, desperate fabrication. "Oh, this old thing?" I chuckled, as if we were discussing a quaint garden tool. "It's an antique. A family heirloom, actually. It's a rustic landscaping timber. For building a retaining wall. The old-fashioned way. My grandpa was a Viking landscaper. Yeah, very big on tradition, the old man was." "A Viking landscaper?" my inner monologue screamed. "That's the best you could come up with?" Officer Miller stared at me. He looked at the perfectly manicured lawns, the identical beige houses, the distinct lack of fjords or longships in tranquil meadows. He sighed, a deep, world-weary sigh that said, "I do not get paid enough to unpack this particular brand of weirdness before 10 a.m. "Uh-huh," he said, his voice flat. "A Viking landscaper, right. Okay, well, just try to keep it off the street." He gave me one last, long look, a look that conveyed a profound sense of bewilderment, then rolled up his window and slowly, deliberately, drove away. I watched the cruiser disappear around the corner, my heart jackhammering against my ribs. I had faced the law, and through the power of a truly terrible lie, I had won. The last obstacle had been cleared. The path to the gate was open. The coast was clear. My heart, which had taken up temporary residence in my throat, slowly descended back into my chest. I took a deep, shuddering breath and grabbed the handle of the dolly. The time for planning and near misses was over. It was time for action. "All right, Leo, it's go time," I whispered into my phone, which was still clutched in my hand. "Copy that, Eagle 1," Leo's voice crackled back, thick with manufactured gravitas. "The eagle is moving towards the nest. Repeat, the eagle is moving." The procession of one began. I pushed the dolly down the driveway and onto the pristine asphalt of Tranquil Meadows Circle. The dolly's small wheels made a ridiculous wub-wub-wub thump sound on the pavement, a comical, lopsided rhythm that announced my ludicrous crusade to the entire neighborhood. This wasn't a stealth mission. It was a parade. Curtains twitched in the windows I passed. I saw Mrs. Henderson from number 42, a sweet old lady who baked prize-winning lemon bars, peer out her bay window, her eyes wide with confusion. I gave her a grim, determined nod, as if I were a soldier marching off to a war she couldn't possibly understand. She gave a tentative, hesitant wave back. "He's passing the Hendersons' prize-winning garden gnomes," Leo narrated in a hushed, reverent tone, like a golf announcer at the Masters. "A tricky bit of navigation here, folks. The gnomes are known for their judgmental stares. One wrong move could be disastrous for morale." I maneuvered past the ceramic fishermen and smiling frogs. Further down, I saw Mr. Gable, a retired accountant who had once received a strongly worded letter from Brenda about the unauthorized height of his sunflowers. He was out watering his lawn. Our eyes met. He looked at me, then at the enormous wooden beam I was pushing. A slow smile spread across his face, and he gave me a very deliberate, very enthusiastic thumbs up. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a royal blessing. I wasn't just a madman with a grudge, I was an agent of the people. As I rounded the final bend, the gate came into view, looming like the entrance to Mordor. It was there, at the end of the street, that I saw her. Brenda. She must have seen my bizarre procession from her window. She was standing sentinel, right in front of the gate, her arms crossed, her body rigid with indignation. She had her phone held high, recording my approach. I rolled the ram to a stop about 15 feet away, letting the dolly handle drop with a clatter. The final standoff. "I have you on video, Alex!" Her voice was shrill, a sound that could curdle milk. "This is destruction of property. It's a felony. You will be hearing from my lawyer. The entire board will hear about this. You are finished in this neighborhood." I took a deep breath, the air thick with the scent of cut grass and injustice. I felt strangely calm, a zen-like serenity settling over me. The path was clear in my mind. There was no other way. "Brenda," I said, my voice even and steady. "I gave you a chance to be reasonable. You chose the path of lamination and bureaucracy. You flew too close to the sun on wings of pure, unadulterated pettiness. This," I said, gesturing to the ram, "is the consequence." "You're an animal, a menace!" she shrieked, jabbing her phone in my direction. "No, Brenda," I replied, walking towards the ram and gripping its smooth, worn oak handles. "I'm a small business owner with a very tight delivery schedule and an allergy to pointless authoritarianism now, if you'll excuse me." I turned my back on her, focusing all my attention on the enemy. The large, gray, industrial lockbox bolted to the gate's frame. It was time. I planted my feet firmly on the asphalt, feeling the rough texture through the soles of my sneakers. My knuckles were white as I gripped the handles of the ram. It felt ancient and powerful in my hands, a tool built for a single, glorious purpose. "Leo, you getting this?" I panted into my headset. "I'm practically weeping with joy," his voice came back, filled with a mixture of awe and laughter. "On my mark. 3, 2, 1, for Frodo!" With a guttural yell that came from deep in my belly, I charged forward, putting all my weight, all my frustration, all my righteous indignation into that first charge. The ram felt lighter than I expected, carried forward by the pure, distilled essence of being fed up. Clang! The sound was shockingly loud, a brutal metallic cymbal crash that echoed off the identical beige houses of Tranquil Meadows. The entire gate structure shuddered violently. A bird flew out of a nearby tree in a panic. But the lock, the monstrous heart of the system, held fast. The gate remained closed. From behind me, I heard Brenda let out a short, triumphant laugh. "Aha! See? It's reinforced steel! You are pathetic!" My arms vibrated from the impact. My shoulders screamed in protest. For a second, a sliver of doubt pierced my zen-like calm. Maybe she was right. Maybe this was a stupid, futile gesture. Then I looked at the lockbox. I saw a small dent, a tiny sign of weakness. And I thought of Gus, the contractor's deadpan voice. I remembered Leo's idiotic but heartfelt encouragement. I remembered Mr. Gable's thumbs up. This wasn't just for me. This was for the poodles, the sunflowers, and the hamsters. "Round 2, I muttered. I backed up, taking a few more steps this time. I took a deeper breath. I ignored the burning in my shoulders and the smug commentary from my audience of one. I focused on the bolts, the 4 industrial-sized hex bolts that held the lockbox to the gate's frame. I aimed for the top 2. It was the gate's weak point, its Achilles heel. "This one's for the raccoons!" I yelled, and charged again. This time I didn't just push. I threw my entire body into it, a human trebuchet launching a projectile of pure spite. The timing was perfect. My feet left the ground for a split second as the iron head of the ram connected with the upper edge of the lockbox. The sound this time wasn't a clang. It was a deep, guttural, and utterly satisfying crunch. It was the sound of tortured metal giving up the ghost. It was the sound of shearing bolts and stripped threads. There was a shower of blue sparks as internal wires snapped. The lockbox tore away from the gate with a screech of protest, its connection to the world severed. It dangled for a single, dramatic moment from a thick black cable, like a hanged man, and then fell to the asphalt with a pathetic, final clatter. An eerie silence fell upon Tranquil Meadows' circle. The only sound was my own ragged breathing and the soft, metallic groan of the gate as, freed from its metallic overlord, it swung slowly, majestically open. I stood there, panting, leaning on the ram like a conquering hero surveying the battlefield. My muscles ached, my hands were raw, but I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. It smelled like victory, and a little bit like ozone from the fried electronics. I turned my head. Brenda's mouth was hanging wide open, her face a perfect mask of disbelief. Her phone, the instrument of her intended victory, was lowered, forgotten in her hand. Her reign was over. The gate was open. The profound silence of the aftermath was broken by the distant but rapidly approaching sound of sirens. It seemed Brenda had recovered her senses enough to make one last, desperate call to her allies in law enforcement. I wasn't worried. I leaned the ram against the now liberated gate, crossed my arms, and waited. I had a feeling this next conversation would be different. 2 police cars screeched to a halt at the end of the street, their flashing red and blue lights painting the beige houses in frantic, strobing colors. Officer Miller, the young cop from before, got out of the first car, his face a perfect picture of pained resignation. He looked like a kid who had been called to the principal's office for something his older, cooler brother had done. The second car door opened, and a much different figure emerged. This man was older, with a salt-and-pepper mustache, and the weary, stoic expression of a man who had seen every form of human foolishness, and was profoundly unimpressed by all of them. His name tag read Sergeant Davis. He approached the scene with the slow, deliberate pace of someone who knew that rushing only made things worse. Brenda, snapping out of her stupor, ran towards them, her phone held out like a holy relic. "Officers, thank goodness, you're here! Arrest him! Look what he did! I have it all on video! He's a vandal, a menace to society!" Sergeant Davis completely ignored her. His eyes took in the entire scene. The open gate, the shattered lockbox lying on the ground, me standing calmly beside my instrument of liberation. His gaze settled on the battering ram. He looked at it for a long, contemplative moment. Then his eyes met mine. There wasn't anger in them. There was something else. A flicker of amusement? Resignation? "Okay," he said, his voice a low baritone that commanded attention. He stopped a few feet from me. "I'm only going to ask this once, and I want you to think very carefully about your answer." He gestured with his thumb towards the ram. "What the hell happened here?" Before I could answer, Brenda started again. "He attacked the gate. With that thing. He's unhinged. He was yelling about raccoons." Sergeant Davis held up a single, large hand, and Brenda's tirade stopped mid-squawk. He didn't even look at her. His eyes were still locked on mine. "Son, you want to tell me your side?" Calmly and rationally, I explained everything. I told him I was a resident. I told him about the new, unannounced gate protocol that offered no immediate recourse for residents. I explained the time-sensitive nature of my delivery. I even mentioned the jousting golden retrievers, which earned a slight twitch of Sergeant Davis's mustache. I explained that I had been, for all intents and purposes, locked out of my own home and neighborhood. And crucially, I told him I had already arranged for a professional contractor to come and repair the damage at my own expense. Davis listened patiently, nodding slowly. He then turned his head, finally acknowledging Brenda. "Ma'am, is he a resident here?" "Well, yes, but—" "And did you, or the HOA, lock this man, a resident, out of his property with no immediate way for him to get in or out?" "It's community property, and the newsletter clearly stated the rules." Sergeant Davis held up his hand again. The gesture was quiet, but it had an absolute finality to it. "Ma'am, this is a civil matter. A profoundly stupid civil matter, but a civil one nonetheless. We don't arrest homeowners for gaining access to their own property, no matter how unorthodox the method." He looked back at me, his expression unreadable. "You might want to invest in a key next time, or at least a good bolt cutter. It's less conspicuous." He turned to a visibly relieved Officer Miller. "Let's go. We're done here?" With that, they turned and walked back to their cruisers, leaving Brenda sputtering in a cloud of impotent rage. As they drove away, I could have sworn I saw Sergeant Davis shaking his head and chuckling. Just as the police cars disappeared around the corner, a new vehicle rumbled up to the curb. It was a rusty but reliable-looking work truck with the words, "Gus's Grinding and Welding," stenciled on the door. The driver's side door opened, and Gus himself emerged. He was a barrel-chested man with a thick beard, chewing on the end of an unlit cigarillo. He moved with the same unhurried purpose as Sergeant Davis. Gus took in the entire tableau with a single, sweeping glance. The broken lock, the victorious ram, the fuming Brenda, and me, the tired but triumphant protagonist. He took a long drag from his cigarillo, then pulled it from his mouth. "Yep," he grunted, the single word carrying a world of meaning. "That's a non-vehicular object incident, all right." He walked over to the gate, nudging the shattered lockbox with the toe of his steel-toed boot. He inspected the sheared bolts with a professional eye, then gave the gate a little shake. "Could have been worse," he announced, to no one in particular. "Could have bent the frame. You got a clean break." He turned to me, and for the first time, a tiny hint of a smile touched the corner of his lips. "I can have this patched up and a new commercial-grade keypad installed by 3 o'clock. Simple code, easy for everyone to use. That'll be $1,200 for the parts and labor." He paused, looking over at the RAM. "Plus a $200 creative problem-solving fee." I couldn't help but smile back. "Fair enough," I said. "Bill me." He just nodded, already pulling tools from the back of his truck. The chaos was over. The professional had arrived to restore order. I finally loaded my cornhole set into my car and, for the first time that morning, drove out of the tranquil Meadows gate, which stood wide open, welcoming me to the world beyond. A week later, peace had been restored to the neighborhood, albeit a new kind of peace. The gate, as promised by Gus, was repaired with a simple, elegant keypad. The code was emailed to every resident, along with a sheepish apology from the HOA board about the less-than-ideal rollout of our new security initiative. The emergency HOA Zoom meeting, which Brenda had demanded, was a spectacular failure for her. She had come prepared with a PowerPoint presentation detailing my rampage, complete with stills from her video. What she hadn't been prepared for was the flood of angry emails the board had already received from other residents. It turned out that I wasn't the only one who had been blindsided and infuriated by the new rule. There were stories of missed doctor's appointments, stranded babysitters, and a very angry grocery delivery guy who had been forced to abandon a week's worth of melting ice cream at the gate. The battering ram incident had become a catalyst. I was a reluctant folk hero. Brenda was quietly and unanimously voted off the security committee. I received a formal letter of censure in the mail, along with a fine for the exact amount on Gus's invoice, which I paid immediately. I framed the letter and hung it in my office. It felt like a diploma. That evening, I was in my garage. I had spent the afternoon cleaning the battering ram, polishing its iron head and rubbing linseed oil into its solid oak body. It was a beautiful object, a piece of functional history. I mounted it horizontally on the main wall of the garage, a place of honor. Below it, I screwed in a small brass plaque I'd had engraved. It read, "In case of emergency, break gate." My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Tiffany, the cornhole client. It was a picture of her husband, a wide grin on his face, posing next to the jousting golden retriever set at his party. The message read, "OMG, he loved it! You saved the day!" I smiled and looked up at my trophy on the wall. They say you shouldn't use a sledgehammer to crack a nut. But sometimes, when the nut is a grade A, HOA certified Karen, a sledgehammer isn't enough. Sometimes you need something with a little more history, a little more weight. Sometimes you need a battering ram, and the beautiful, satisfying silence that comes after the crunch. I cracked open a beer, the undisputed, and deeply reluctant, king of my castle.